So the other day I was on Twitter and I came across this picture that really caught my attention. Now here's a picture of the Carolina Panthers captains just a few seasons ago in 2015. In this picture includes Cam Newton, Greg Olsen, Ryan Khalil, Luke Kuechly, AJ Klein, and Thomas Davis. This was the same season that the Panthers went 15-1 and made it all the way to the Super Bowl before eventually losing to the Broncos. At the time, Carolina seemed like they were going to dominate the league for years to come, and with Cam Newton playing at an MVP level, their ceiling didn't have a cap. But fast forward to 2020 and the Panthers are preparing to retool and rebuild, as all the players in this picture are no longer on the team. So what happened to this once bright Panthers squad? In today's video, we'll be looking back at the last few seasons and trying to examine what has gone wrong. Now their downfall really started after that Super Bowl loss to the Broncos, and that 2016 offseason turned out to be a crucial one for the team moving forward. It was thought that the Panthers needed to upgrade their offensive line, specifically at the tackle positions where they were killed by Denver, get more help in the secondary to pair with rising cornerback Josh Norman, and maybe add a few pieces on offense to pair with Devin Funchess, Greg Olsen, and Kelvin Benjamin, who was coming back from an ACL injury. The Panthers offseason got busy really fast, as they re-signed Mike Tolbert, defensive end Charles Johnson, and then franchise tagged Josh Norman in the hopes of signing him to a long-term deal. But then just a few days before the 2016 draft began, Norman and the Panthers were unable to complete a deal, and ultimately, the Panthers took away the franchise tag on Norman, which made him a free agent. The move was shocking to mostly everyone, as with Norman being one of the Panthers' defensive anchors, it was thought that they would be able to come to terms on a deal. But Norman ultimately would sign a 5-year contract with the Washington Redskins, giving him the highest paid contract for a cornerback ever, and the Panthers were now left with a massive hole in their already less than stellar secondary. So in that draft, they selected defensive lineman Vernon Butler to bolster their D-line, and then spent their next 3 draft picks on cornerbacks James Bradbury, Daryl Worley, and Zach Sanchez. So to end off an offseason where they came one win away from a championship, the Panthers didn't give Cam Newton another weapon, nor did they add to the offensive line to protect him, and their secondary was now much weaker and experienced than before. Still, the Panthers weren't expected to drop off a cliff altogether, mainly due to Cam Newton and stud linebacker Luke Kuechly. But the Super Bowl bug bit the Panthers hard as they started the season off 1-5 heading into their bye week, including losing the opener to the Broncos 21-20 and losing to the Buccaneers and Saints each by 3 points. They never really recovered from their slow start and finished at an abysmal 6-10 record on the season. The defense really took a step back this year, going from 6th in the league in points allowed all the way to 26th. And you couple that with the 6 one-possession losses, being near the top of the league in concussions and still trying to fix their offensive line, and that 6-10 finish really made sense. It was very disappointing, but there was optimism that with a high pick and another offseason to get right, the Panthers would be back. And they didn't shy away from making additions this time. They added tackle Matt Khalil and cornerbacks Captain Munderland from the Vikings, and then signed safety Mike Adams as well as former pass rusher Julius Peppers. With their high pick in the draft, they selected running back Christian McCaffrey and then added wide receiver Curtis Samuel and Taylor Motton in the second round. So the Panthers had actually done a decent job to add to their roster, and Gettleman didn't do too bad, but during the summer before the regular season began, he was relieved of his duties and replaced by Marty Herney as the interim GM. But the belief that the Panthers would bounce back this season would be proven to be true, as the Panthers started out fast at 4-1 with a big Thursday night matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles in their second big test of the year after defeating the Patriots in week 4. They would lose that game by 5 points, but would bounce back and head into their bye week at 7-3 and a shot at the NFC South crown. But they would lose to the Saints for the second time in the season, putting that chance at jeopardy, but in week 17 they still had a great shot at winning the division. Now despite losing the tiebreaker to the Saints, both were 11-4 heading into the final week of the season. So if the Saints lost against Tampa Bay and the Panthers won against the Falcons, Carolina would win the division. Now the Bucs somehow beat the Saints, but of course the Panthers lost to the Falcons, giving them 2nd place in the South and the 5th seed in the NFC. This was a huge loss because it meant that the Panthers had to go on the road to New Orleans for the playoffs instead of hosting them for the wildcard round. And that wildcard game against the Saints was a back and forth affair, but ultimately the Saints made more plays and won the game 31-26. Now there were a few things to note from this season. The offense was still lacking elite weapons to surround Cam Newton with, and Cam himself had been struggling due to a lack of protection and weapons, and the secondary was still weak. But heading into the offseason, the Panthers seemed to once again address those issues. They signed wide receivers Torrey Smith and Jarius Wright in free agency, added cornerback Ross Cockrell and safety Denoris Searcy, and then added Dontari Poe and offensive lineman Jeremiah Searles to help with losing Andrew Norwell. They didn't stop there either and went strong in the draft. They selected wide receiver DJ Moore in the first round of the draft and then added more secondary help in the form of Dante Jackson and Rashawn Golden. They They were able to acquire Golden by trading struggling receiver Kelvin Benjamin for a 3rd and a 7th round pick. And at the start of the season, the addition seemed to work well as the Panthers started off 6-2, but then proceeded to lose 7 straight games before finally winning their last game of the season. They were primed to get a playoff spot this year and maybe even win the division, but instead were once again under 500. So back to the drawing board they went, and with the pass rush struggling, this time the Panthers made that their priority by signing Gerald McCoy, Bruce Irvin, and drafting Brian Burns in the 1st round. Among their other additions included quarterback Will Greer in the 3rd round, tackle Greg Little in the 2nd, center Matt Paradis, and receiver Chris Hogan. But with Cam recovering from offseason shoulder surgery, he would end up injuring his foot in preseason and would play just 2 games in the regular season as a result. Enter in quarterback Kyle Allen into the picture, and after taking over for Cam, the Panthers won 4 straight games and headed into their bye week at 4-2. Many started suggesting that the Panthers get rid of Cam and start Allen as the quarterback for the future, but after losing 9 of their last 10 games, those suggestions were basically off. So once again, they finished under 500, and this time they made big changes. Ron Rivera was let go, and the team hired Baylor head coach Matt Rule, who had turned the Bears back into a good football program. But here we are in 2020, and the 2015 Carolina Panthers team seems like a whole decade ago, considering where the team is now. But yet, despite the last few seasons, the Panthers could be fine. But what exactly led to their downfall? I think the first thing that we can pinpoint is the transactions that the team made during this time span. Time after time, they attempted to fill their holes along the offensive line, in the secondary, and with the wide receiver core. Many guys were brought in on proven deals, and none of them really panned out. The offensive line hasn't been up to par with what it should have been, and the Panthers had weaknesses at the tackle position in particular for a while. Now they did just trade for Russell Okung, so he could help out on the edges. And looking at the receiving core, there isn't a single name that really stuck. Thankfully now they have DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, and they also just added Robbie Anderson in free agency, but they brought in guys like Charles Johnson, Russell Shepard, Torrey Smith, Jarius Wright, Aldrick Robinson, and Chris Hogan. Some of these guys contributed, while others just weren't able to produce as much as liked. But between all the names they brought in outside of Moore and Samuel, there's been little to no production from this receiving core. They've had to move on from draft picks Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess because of a lack of production as well. And in the secondary, Carolina has struggled to find a shutdown corner since losing Josh Norman. They did have James Bradbury, who played pretty good over the past few seasons, but he just signed a big contract with the New York Giants, so the Panthers really have Dante Jackson and Corn Elder as the 2 big pieces in the secondary at this present time. So time and time again, the front office has needed to address the holes on this roster and have continuously failed in doing so. Now the second reason for their downfall has been the health of this team. Plenty of the Panthers' big name players have missed significant time during the season or even the whole season due to injury over this time period, and it's really important to note just how injury riddled this team has been. Just over the past 4 seasons, Trey Boston, Corn Elder, Curtis Samuel, Matt Khalil, Graham Gano, Greg Olsen, Shaq Thompson, Darrell Williams, Greg Little, Dontari Poe, Kawan Short, and Cam Newton have all ended the season on injured reserve. And those are just some of the bigger names that I saw on those lists, and these guys were supposed to contribute or were anticipated to contribute over these seasons. Add into the fact that guys like Luke Kuechly, who never had a long-term injury but missed games due to concussions, has now retired from the league due to that issue, and you will see just how injury riddled this team really has been. But the one that really hurts for the Panthers is of course Cam Newton. He was the one guy on this team who can make the team go and take them to new heights. And as we've seen in the past, he's a warrior and can really do it all for his team no matter who's on the field. But over the past 2 seasons, he's dealt with both shoulder issues and then he had a foot injury that cost him the final 14 games of the 2019 campaign. And now he's not even on the team anymore, which is very sad because the Panthers had him for his prime and just failed to surround him with talent. The last reason for their downfall would have to be the people who were in charge, but one guy in particular, Dave Gettleman. He's a name that we've heard a lot recently with his destruction or rebuilding of the New York Giants, but he didn't do too well down in Carolina. Now, of course, he kind of built the Super Bowl roster, or added to it if you want to be specific, and he did draft Christian McCaffrey, but I found one interesting statistic from the Gettleman era. Only 7 of 21 players selected by Gettleman from 2013 to 2016 are still on the current roster, and 5 of those players are free agents this offseason. And of the 25 free agents Gettleman signed in his tenure with the Panthers, none of them are on the current roster. That's just sad. Time after time, Gettleman and the Panthers in general missed in free agency and in the draft, and it has really cost them and prevented them from building a Super Bowl contender into a Super Bowl champion. You also have to factor in that the Panthers lost 2 great coordinators in back-to-back off seasons in Sean McDermott and Steve Wilkes, both getting head coaching jobs, which would explain why the defense really took a hit. It really is sad to see just how far the Panthers have fallen since that Super Bowl season in 2015. I can vividly remember me and a friend having a conversation about how this Panthers team would be a threat for years to come with Cam Ingram and Kuechly, but now both of those two are gone and we are entering a new era of Panthers football. Matt Rule seems like a good head coach and the organization seems to be invested in him, so we'll just have to give the Panthers time and see what the future holds in Carolina. This has been the downfall of the Carolina Panthers. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new, and as always, I will see you guys next time.